Hi everyone, it's Clinton from Home Drafting and Design here on site at Waywell Street in Whitby, where you can see behind me there are 4 different houses being constructed sequentially. We're gonna go for a walkthrough today and see 4 different phases of how construction is working on these sites. So why don't we go for a walkthrough? I'll show you how things are coming along. So, out of all 4 of our houses, this is the least put together, but so much has already occurred on this property. First off, there was excavation. Cleared all the land so that we could actually put our footings in place. Secondly, footings were poured. Then our foundation walls went up, and as you can see, we then got our floor system and wall system and roof systems installed. So here we can see that all the basic framing has been installed. All of our blocking has been installed in the wall for additional support. All of our roof trusses have gone up. Now for this build, just like the other builds on the street, we've used engineered floor system and an engineered roof system. What that means is that we're able to make longer spans with our joists, but wherever those joists end, we have to reinforce and be able to support all that additional weight. Also with that, we have some very interesting roof lines happening with this build, especially across the front here. So in this situation, we have a support wall right in the middle, where instead of our trusses spanning from one wall to the other extent wall on either side of the building, we actually have them transitioning over top of this wall. And because the roofs are on 2 different pitches and 2 different angles, we've actually had to create a bit of a knee wall to support the higher trusses. Now that's just the start of some of the interesting framing things that are going on in this house. Let's go for a walkthrough and see some other components that put this place together. So no sooner have we left our front foyer and we've already got into some interesting engineering structures of this house. Above my head we can see several different LVLs run in a multitude of directions, and the reason for this is the parapet wall that's above the 2nd story. On the roof structure there's a wall that sticks out above everything else, and it projects out past the front wall where the floor system is and needs to be supported. So above my head we can see that there's an LVL run out on the far side here that really is only supporting about a 4 foot by 4 foot square of this parapet wall that projects out, but needs to run from one structural component, which is the garage wall, over to the exterior wall so it can be properly supported. You can see that there's some LVLs have been run in between as well, and these have been done to secure everything together. Because of the sheer length of this LVL with really nothing on either end to support it laterally, it has a tendency to want to bow. So by creating this box creation with our LVLs, we're able to support that structure above and not have the LVLs bow on us. Now as we progress into the building, we can see that our stairs are just off here to the side. Our stairs have not been officially put in yet, but in the meantime we do have some landings that have been installed both for the upstairs as well as the downstairs. We can see that they've actually been installed directly to the framing walls that are here because they are going to remain. Eventually the stairs will be installed, but in the meantime these landings will be secured and used as the finished landing. They'll just be finalized with some oak treading over top of them. Now, due to the sheer size of this building, we're even using engineered wood, we're not able to make the full span across the width of it. So what that means is we need to have some form of structural support halfway through to support our floor system, otherwise it's going to cave through. And that is what this wall becomes. This is our structural wall that runs down through the center. In line with our garage wall, it picks up a beam over top of the stair opening so that all the floor system can be supported. And over top of our doors, we have headers or lintels that have been installed to properly support this floor system all the way over to this corner. Once we get over to this corner, we make a transition because the floor system up above stops and everything beyond this point is actually just an elevated vaulted ceiling. And we'll see how those walls are properly structured as well. So like most of our exterior walls, we have created everything out of 2x6 wood. And the reason for that is it gives us a large enough cavity to be able to install our R22 insulation. Now, most of the walls throughout this house are only about 8 to 10 feet tall, but in the back section here, we start off at the rear wall at 13 feet, and by the time we reach the top, we're almost 18 feet in the air. This means that this wall is extremely tall, and it means that our 2x6s have a natural tendency to want to bow. So how do we solve this problem? Well, under the Ontario Building Code, we're able to double up the 2x6 studs and put them at a 12-inch on center instead of a 16-inch on center, thereby stiffening this wall up enough so that it doesn't have that natural tendency to want to bow if they were just single studs at 16-inch on center. So this is extremely important for several reasons. One, because the wall is so tall, but also because we have a multitude of weights above us with snow loads and trusses. In fact, let's go take a look at those trusses right now. So now we transition to our second story, and most of the framing that we see up here is non-structural. The only real supporting walls are our exterior walls. Now we can see above our heads the trusses have been installed. We do have a girder truss that runs in different segments across this roof. Because of the sheer span of this roof, we had to break it up, and because it makes transitions in heights, it was easier to run a girder truss from side to side wall and then support most of our trusses off of that. Now, while we're up here, I want to show you also the parapet wall that we're supporting down below. So it may seem like such an inconsequential little spot, but this little jut out here in the wall creates a multitude of structural components that we have to add. This little piece right here is what creates our parapet wall on the outside above the second story. And because of this little jut out here, we had to put in all those LVLs that we saw in the main foyer downstairs. So our garage wall ends just here at the stairs, and our front wall of the second story ends here. And this little area here needs to be supported by those LVLs that we saw down on the main floor. It's amazing how just a little detail like that little section of wall creates a bunch of structural components that we need to support it properly. Speaking of which, why don't we go take a look downstairs and see how all this superstructure is being supported from down there. So as you can see, I'm walking in from our walkout in this basement, and the reason for that is, well, we don't even have any stairs yet. This construction site is still at its infancy, and because of that, there's still a lot of things that need to be finished down here in the basement. Now, having said that, many things have already occurred down here. First and foremost, we have our footings, we have our foundation walls, and we have our wood knee walls that are supporting all of our superstructure up above our head. One of those walls happens to be our back wall here, and at first glance it looks as though we don't have any headers across the windows and doors. But the reason for that is the headers had to be so tall that they actually integrated it into the floor system. So instead of just doing a single rim board, they actually installed the header in line with the floor system over top of the walls. And by doing this, we were able to support and arch over top of all of our windows and doors without having to worry about any issues later on. And good thing, because that wall not only supports a floor system, it also supports the roof structure up above. Now, that's not the only thing that's happened down here. So why don't we get to some of the nuts and bolts of what's really going on down in this basement. So why talk about the nuts and bolts of construction? Well, because there's nuts and bolts. And in this application, we are actually using some bolts to hold this post and steel beam structure together. You'll notice that we have sort of a T-shaped beam structure going on here. One beam running from side to side of the building and the other one running towards the front of the building. Now the reason for this is we have a transition right at this point. As we saw upstairs on the main floor, the second story floor system ends right in line with this steel beam, and all of our floor system on the main floor or second floor is being supported directly over top of us here with a structural wall. So we need to support that properly, and the best way to do that is with steel in the basement. Gives us our longest spans and allows us to open up this basement as much as possible. So this steel post here in the center is become sort of the apex of where all of these transitions are happening. The structure from the front of the building as well as the sides of the building and back are all being supported along this line right here. Along with this post, we have two other posts on either side of the building that are sitting directly on top of our foundation walls that are stepping down and have been integrated directly into our 2x6 framing. By doing this, we're able to support this beam all the way across. It's been bolted in place so that it can't go anywhere. And then our other steel beam that runs perpendicular towards the front of the house comes in here and lines up with this beam here. Now we have a couple of different options of how we could secure all this stuff together, but due to the fact that this steel beam is slightly taller than our steel beam running from side to side, what we opted to do was actually install a flange and bolt this together rather than weld it. Either option is perfectly acceptable in this situation, but for this type of transition, we've allotted bolts to hold everything together. So it may seem like there's not much else that's really happening here in the basement. And we have gravel all over the floor, we've got our framing and steel beams and posts in place, but there doesn't seem like much else that's happening here. But there's a lot that happens beneath the surface, especially with plumbing, that needs to be installed before we finish this floor. Let's go take a look and see what the plumbers have already started to do in this space before we get a top coat of concrete. So before anything can really be done down here, all of our plumbing has to be pre-planned. As you can see at my feet, there are two different types of piping that have already been installed, some black piping and some white piping. The black piping stubs out of the floor and basically is used throughout the entire house for our drainage. And the reason for that is ABS piping is to be used above grade. Below grade, we're to use PVC piping, which is indicated by the white pipe that we can see. It connects to our ABS and runs out to our sewer lines at the street. So we have our two different types of piping already installed, and we can see that certain stub-ups have already been made in this floor. And the reason for that is for our toilet flange, our vanity, our showers, and of course our stacks that lead to all the drains that are up above. And all of this needs to be pre-planned ahead of time because once the concrete is poured, all of these things are literally set in stone. Now, as we transition out of this house, we're going to step into house number 2 and we're going to see how HVAC, plumbing, and electrical ties into all the framing that's already been installed. So as we step into house number 2, we can see that all the framing has been completed and now our trifecta of trades have come in to start their work. So who are the trifecta? The big players in the rough-in game, and that is our HVAC, electrical, and plumbing. So as you can see, electrical has already started to be installed and been run down to boxes. Our plumbing vents and drains have been installed, and above my head you can see that the HVAC has been installed to heat the entire space here. Not only that, but they've also gone through and done the back framing. Now if you don't know what back framing is, back framing essentially is the framing that goes in after the trades have completed their work, and that way we have nice smooth areas in which we can install all of our drywall. So this intricate dance between plumbing, HVAC, and electrical not only needs to be completed here on the main floor, but also in the basement and on the second story. So why don't we go take a walk upstairs and we can see how those rough-ins have been completed up there. So as we step up into our second story, we can see that the rough-in trades have started to do some of their work up here as well. We can see that the venting for all of the plumbing that's downstairs as well as on this floor has been run up and into the attic and eventually flows out to our vent pipe that's in the roof. And that's very important for the plumbing because just as water needs to drain out to the sewer, it also needs to have the ability to suck air into the system to allow that water to flow. Otherwise, it becomes almost like a straw with water in it with your thumb over it. It's got suction and there's no place for the water to be able to run. So this is very important that all that venting has been run. On top of that, you can see that our electrical has been run and has been cut and spliced in all the boxes and tucked away. It's very important, obviously, to have that electrical not only run, but also tucked back in. This allows for the drywaller to be able to install his sheet directly over top and cut around that box, not affecting any of the electrical and also exposing that box. So now we move on to house number 3. And at this stage, we can see the drywall has started to be installed. Now, directly behind me, you'll see that there's actually a lot of drywall that's missing. And the reason for that is this whole area is actually going to be our main entrance door with 2 side lights and 1 large door. But all the surrounding area has been drywalled up. And I'm going to show you what that looks like and how they put that all together right over here. Now, as we move into the drywall stage, it is extremely crucial that all of our rough-ins that need to be exposed from the previous step are exposed, because after the drywall's up, it's a heck of a lot harder to find. So as you can see, our electrical boxes were designed with a bit of a projection to it, so they would come out flush with the drywall when it's completed. So all the electrical, as we saw in the previous house, has been neatly cut and tucked into the box, so it's ready to go, and the drywallers have then installed their sheets over top of it. And by having that projection, they're able to follow the line with their router all the way around and make a nice clean cut around that box. So we end up with a very tight seal around all of our electrical fixtures. So like in all construction, when drywall goes up, there needs to be a finish when we reach our corners. Now, inside corners are easy because we're going to be drywalling them and mudding and taping them. But what do we do with the exterior corners? Well, in this application, the contractor has decided to opt for a metal corner bead to go on the edges. Now there are different ways of applying these corner beads as well too. These ones appear to have been installed with staples. And then at any place where there's a transition of corner beads, they're back cut as well. And the reason for this is the metal corners of the corner bead have a tendency to want to lift out off the drywall sheets. And if they're not properly cut back, when we get to the mudding and taping stage, we start having issues being able to get a nice flat finish. So very important for all of our corners that are outside corners to have these beads on it. Let's go take a look downstairs and see how things are progressing down there, because they're just in the process of installing the ceiling drywall, and we can see some of the insulation. So we have a great opportunity as we step into the basement here, because we can actually see both the insulation, vapor barrier, and drywall all occurring at the same time. So as you can see along the side wall over here, we have a step down foundation wall, and that's because our grade changes as we move down into the basement here. At the back, we have a walkout. At the front, we're actually right up at almost main level with grade. So the wall that you see that is covered in concrete is going to be covered in these rolls of insulation, which are actually a R20 continuous insulation that will go all the way around the base. The upper wall is framed with our 2x6 construction and has been installed with R22 insulation and vapor barrier across it. Now, when we're doing vapor barrier, it's very important that that vapor barrier is continuous. It has to be continuous all the way through the entire building envelope. So how do we achieve that? Is up in the joist cavities, there's actually vapor barrier that is wrapped up into that joist cavity with insulation across the rim boards that are there, and then tied to the floor, and then continued up as we go through our different stages. Now, this is a rare situation too. Not only is this a new build for a single family dwelling, but as soon as it's completed, we will be changing this basement into an accessory apartment. So above my head, you can see that we've already installed the resilient channel and Roxol safe and sound insulation. There's 2 layers of safe and sound insulation, and our resilient channel has been installed perpendicular to our joists, and very soon we'll see that there's drywall that's going to be going over top of that to achieve our fire separation. Now, we have resilient channel over here, but as we progress over here, we can already see that the installers have started the drywall work that's here. Now, as I mentioned before, this is being done as a single family dwelling, and we will be putting in an accessory suite afterwards in the basement. But in the initial permit application, we applied with this floor system being created. So 2 layers of Type X drywall, as you can see, over my head, being installed on the resilient channel, and safe and sound insulation in the cavity. By doing this, when we get to the stage where we're ready to create the accessory apartment, our fire separation is continuous all the way across the ceiling, and we just have to build everything underneath. So essentially, that is what is happening here at the drywall stage in the house. We can see that the drywall is being installed. Once it's finished, we're going to be able to mud and tape it, and then we're able to move on to our last phase of construction, which is the finishing touches. Let's go take a look at those. So now we've stepped in to our final house, and we can see what a massive difference this is from even the last house that we were in with drywall. We now have our finishes up, all the mudding and taping has been completed. We now have feature walls and paint that have been installed. Our doors and trim have all been put in to finalize the look of this product for the client. Now, even in something as simple as the drywall work, putting in the corner beads and having it all mudded off, we now have these really clean lines for our finishes there. Having now put up all of our trim around all the doors, all of those rough edges of the drywall have all been covered and have been completed. It just looks like a fully completed, finished house that someone could live in. Unlike the other houses that we've already looked at that are still in the construction phase, this house has been finished as a single family dwelling. That means that the basement is not going to be converted into an accessory apartment as we saw with the other 3 units. With this house, we're going to see some key features in it that aren't necessarily going to translate into those accessory apartments. One being the contemporary chandeliers that we see at the front hallway and up the stairs. Second being the decorative wall. And third being the stairs that I'm standing next to right now. You can see that these stairs have been left very open and airy because we don't have a separate unit that we have to segregate off in the basement. This has been done with a single stringer down the center with a 2.5-inch oak tread across for our steps. And by doing this, we're able to keep all of the stringers as open as possible to allow as much light down through. Even the railing has been done in glass so that we can have that open and airy feel. You'll notice that our existing framed out landing is still remained. It's just been clad in oak, and that way it gives it the same finishes that we see on the rest of the staircase. So this is just the start of some of the key features in this house. There's a lot more to see. You want to see more? Let's go for a walkthrough. Well, that concludes our walkthrough of all 4 stages of construction that are going here on Waywell Street. I hope you enjoyed our video getting to see everything from foundation and framing all the way through to the final product. Make sure that you like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.